A poor cleaner gave up her raincoat to shield an old homeless woman, unaware that this single act of kindness would change her life forever. But while she treated the woman with compassion, the CEO's fiancé cruelly insulted and threw her out, never realizing that this woman was actually the mother of the wealthiest man in the city. When the truth is revealed, who will receive love and who will pay the price for their arrogance? Watch until the end to uncover the shocking twist. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Sandra had been searching for a job for months. Every morning, she woke up early, dressed in her neatly pressed but old clothes, and walked around the city applying wherever she could. But no one wanted to hire her. Either she didn't have enough experience, or the job had already been taken. It felt like the world had turned its back on her. She lived in a small one-room apartment that barely had enough space for her bed and a wooden table. The rent was overdue, and her landlord had already warned her that if she didn't pay soon, she would be thrown out. One evening, when she was returning home after another exhausting day of job hunting, she saw a "Help Wanted" sign hanging outside a large office building. Desperate and with nothing to lose, she walked inside and asked for the job. The receptionist barely looked at her before handing her a form. "Fill this out and come back tomorrow morning," she said in a bored tone. Sandra's heart pounded with hope. She took the form home, filled it out carefully, and barely slept that night, praying that this would finally be her chance. The next morning, she arrived at the office building, dressed in her best clothes, which were still modest compared to the expensive suits and dresses the employees wore. To her surprise, she was hired immediately. The job was simple but demanding: cleaning offices, emptying trash bins, and ensuring the workplace remained spotless. It wasn't glamorous, but to Sandra, it was a blessing. Her first 2 days on the job were uneventful. She worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and was grateful to finally earn some money. But on the third day, something happened that would change everything. That morning, the sky was dark, and heavy rain poured down, drenching the city. The streets were wet and slippery, and people rushed to work, trying to avoid getting soaked. Sandra held onto her small, worn-out umbrella tightly as she hurried toward the office. She could not afford to be late. As she was walking, she noticed something unusual. An old woman stood alone in the rain, her clothes completely soaked, her hair dripping, and her bare feet shivering on the cold pavement. She had no umbrella, no coat, nothing to protect her from the cold. Sandra's heart ached. She knew what it felt like to struggle, to feel helpless, to have no one to turn to. She couldn't just walk past the woman. "Mama, take this. You will get sick," Sandra said, as she gently handed her umbrella to the old woman. The woman looked up at Sandra, her eyes filled with exhaustion, but also kindness. "My daughter, I have nowhere to go," the old woman whispered. "I just arrived in this city, and I know no one." Sandra hesitated. She barely had enough money for herself, but she couldn't leave this woman in the rain. Reaching into her pocket, she took out the little money she had for the day. It wasn't much, but it was all she could offer. "Here, Mama, take this and find somewhere warm to stay," Sandra said softly. The old woman looked at the money and shook her head. "I cannot take what you need for yourself, my child." Sandra thought for a moment, then smiled. "Come with me. I am going to work. You can stay with me until you find your way." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "May the heavens bless you, my daughter." Sandra held the woman's hand and walked with her under the umbrella. As they reached the office building, Sandra looked around and found a small, quiet corner near the storage room where the old woman could sit. She helped dry her wet clothes with a clean towel and gave her a cup of warm tea from the office kitchen. "Mama, don't worry. I have only a few hours before my break. After that, I will take you somewhere safe before coming back to work," Sandra assured her. The old woman smiled gently and nodded. She watched Sandra as she worked, carefully scrubbing the floors and emptying trash bins. The young girl had so little, yet she gave so much. A few hours later, Sandra stepped out of the office during her break. She walked quickly through the now drizzling streets to a nearby food stall and bought a small meal with the little money she had left. It wasn't much, but she wanted to make sure Mama had something warm to eat. While Sandra was still out, something happened inside the office that she never expected. Emily, the CEO's fiancée, arrived unannounced. She loved showing up unexpectedly, making sure everyone in the office knew she was going to be their future boss's wife. She was always dressed in the most expensive designer clothes, her nails perfectly polished, her hair styled flawlessly. As she walked in, she immediately noticed the old woman sitting quietly in the corner. Emily's face twisted in disgust. "Who let this dirty, poor beggar in here?" she asked loudly, making sure everyone in the office heard her. The old woman slowly looked up at Emily, her eyes tired but calm. "My child, please do not be angry. I will leave now," she said softly. Emily scoffed, crossing her arms. "You better be. This is my husband-to-be's company. You are not needed here, you dirty old woman. Now get out." The old woman sighed and shook her head. "You have a bad character, my daughter. I wonder what kind of man would take you as his wife." Emily's eyes widened in rage. "You poor old woman. Just shut up and leave. You have no right to talk about me." The old woman slowly stood up, her frail hands trembling slightly as she walked toward the door. She did not argue. She did not fight back. She only walked out, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. Just as the old woman stepped outside, Sandra returned, carrying the warm meal she had bought. Her heart dropped when she saw Mama standing near the gate, looking sad and defeated. "Mama, what are you doing out here?" she asked, rushing to her side. The old woman sighed heavily. "My child, do not be angry. A woman came in and told me to leave. She said I was dirty and poor, and that I did not belong here." Sandra's hands clenched into fists. "Who dared to do this to you?" she asked, her voice shaking with anger. The old woman hesitated before whispering, "She said she is the CEO's wife-to-be. Her name is Emily." Sandra's blood boiled. She turned sharply, her heart pounding with fury, and stormed inside the office. Emily was still there, sitting comfortably in one of the office chairs, checking her nails like nothing had happened. Sandra marched straight up to her, her voice firm. "Emily." Emily lazily looked up and smirked. "Oh, the poor little worker is back. What do you want?" Sandra's eyes burned with anger. "How dare you treat my mother that way? What gives you the right to insult an elderly woman?" Emily rolled her eyes and laughed mockingly. "Your mother? That dirty beggar? Oh, please. I warned Austin not to hire you, but he didn't listen. And now you are here shouting at me?" Sandra took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but the rage in her heart was too strong. "You don't even know if my boss will marry you. Look at you, so heartless, so full of yourself." Emily's face darkened. "What did you just say?" she hissed. Sandra stepped closer. "You heard me. If you can treat a helpless old woman like that, I wonder how you will treat your future mother-in-law." Emily scoffed. "Never. My mother-in-law is not poor and dirty like that old woman. She is classy and beautiful, just like me. I know she will love me when she sees me." Sandra shook her head in disappointment. "You are blind, Emily. You think beauty and money make a good wife? Number A, good wife is kind, respectful, and loving. But you are arrogant and cruel. You will never know what true love is." Emily's eyes burned with rage. She stood up, pointing a manicured finger at Sandra. "I promise you, you are going to lose your job." Sandra laughed bitterly. "I don't care. You insulted my mother. I am taking her home, and I don't need this job anymore." With that, she turned and stormed out, leaving Emily fuming in rage. Sandra and the old woman left the company, walking slowly down the rain-soaked street. Even though she had just lost her job, Sandra felt no regrets. She had done the right thing, and that gave her peace of mind. When they arrived at her small room, she quickly pulled out a chair for the old woman to sit and poured her a glass of water. "Mother, this place is small, but you can stay here with me for a while. Just think of it as your home," Sandra said gently. The old woman looked around the tiny room, her eyes misty. "My child, a home is not about big walls. It is about the love inside. I have never met anyone as kind as you." Sandra smiled, feeling warmth spread in her heart. She quickly took out some food and placed it in front of the old woman. "Eat while it's still hot, Mama. I don't have much, but at least it will keep you full." The old woman took the spoon, her eyes never leaving Sandra. A young girl with so little, yet a heart bigger than anyone she had ever met. After eating, the old woman looked at Sandra thoughtfully. "My daughter, I did not come to this city just to wander around. I came here to find a wife for my son." Sandra was a little surprised but continued listening. The old woman continued, "My son is a hard-working and kind man, but he has not found the right one. And after everything you did today, I believe you are the one I have been looking for." Sandra chuckled shyly. "Mother, I haven't even met him yet. How can I marry someone I don't know anything about?" The old woman nodded. "I understand, but just meet him first. Then you will know." Sandra sighed before agreeing. "All right, Mother, but I have to meet and talk with him first." The old woman smiled brightly, patting Sandra's hand. "That's fine, my child, but there's something you should know. My son is not rich. He is just a simple worker like you." Sandra laughed softly. "Mother, you praise your son so much that now I'm curious. But it doesn't matter to me if he's rich or poor. I just care if he is kind and sincere." The old woman grinned in satisfaction. "That is what matters most, my child." That night, as Sandra was preparing to sleep, her phone suddenly rang. An unknown number appeared on the screen. She hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Hello," Sandra answered gently. A deep, warm, and polite voice responded. "Good evening. This is Austin. My mother has told me a lot about you." Sandra blinked in surprise. "Austin, Mother's son?" "Yes, my mother said you are a very special person, and I would love to meet you too," Austin said sincerely. Sandra smiled. "Then let's meet. But you should know that I am in no rush." Austin chuckled. "Of course, take your time. Can we meet tomorrow?" Sandra agreed and ended the call. She felt something odd but didn't think too much about it. The next morning, Sandra woke up early and prepared to meet Austin. She didn't expect anything special, just wanted to see what kind of person Mother's son was. Austin had arrived earlier and was waiting on a park bench. When Sandra arrived, she saw a young man wearing a simple shirt and old jeans. He looked ordinary, nothing flashy, but his eyes held intelligence and sincerity. "Hello." Austin stood up with a smile. Sandra nodded. "Hello, so you are Austin." They started talking, and strangely enough, Sandra felt very comfortable. Austin had a way of speaking that was engaging and easygoing, without showing off or being arrogant. Sandra asked, "What do you do for a living, Austin?" He just smiled. "I am just an ordinary man doing different jobs to survive." Sandra nodded. "I respect that. Hard work is important." Austin looked at her intently. "And what about you? What do you want in life?" Sandra thought for a moment before saying, "I don't need wealth. I just need someone who loves and respects me." Austin smiled. "If you meet such a person, would you be willing to be with him?" Sandra chuckled. "Of course, but it depends on how I feel too." Their conversation continued throughout the afternoon. Sandra couldn't deny that she was starting to like Austin. He wasn't a conventionally handsome man, but there was something about him that made her feel safe and comfortable. That evening, when she returned home, Sandra received a call from her old company. The manager told her that the CEO had realized his mistake and wanted to take her back. Not just as a regular worker, but as his personal assistant. Sandra was shocked, but after some thought, she agreed. She needed a job to support herself. The next morning, she arrived at the company, but this time, not as a cleaner, but as the CEO's personal assistant. She walked into the office, knocked on the door, and stepped inside. And the man sitting behind the desk was none other than Austin. Sandra froze, eyes wide. Austin smiled. "Welcome back, Sandra." Sandra felt her heart stop for a moment. Austin is the CEO? She couldn't believe her eyes. She took a deep breath and looked him straight in the eye. "So, you tricked me?" Austin shook his head. "No, I just wanted to know if you would love me for who I am, not for what I have. And now I know that you are the one I've been looking for." Sandra stood there, her emotions in turmoil. She had fallen for a man she thought was ordinary, but in reality, he was wealthy and powerful. Everything had just become more complicated than ever. As Sandra stood there processing the shocking revelation that Austin was the CEO, a storm of emotions raged within her. She felt deceived yet also strangely relieved. Austin had hidden his true identity, but he had done it not out of malice but to test her heart. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and met his gaze. "So all this time you were watching me?" She said, her voice calm but firm. Austin nodded, leaning forward slightly. I wanted to see if you would treat me differently if you thought I was poor. I needed to be sure that you loved me for who I am, not for my wealth." Sandra crossed her arms, her heart still pounding. "And what would you have done if I had treated you badly?" Austin smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Then I would have walked away knowing you were not the one. But you passed the test, Sandra. You showed me that true kindness still exists. That is why I chose you." Sandra exhaled slowly. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and deep down she knew he was telling the truth. She had grown to like him before she knew about his wealth, and that feeling was still there. But the thought of being tested without her knowledge still bothered her. Austin, noticing her hesitation, stood up and walked around the desk, stopping in front of her. "Sandra, I never meant to hurt you or make you feel like a game. I just had to be sure. But now that you know the truth, I will not ask for anything more than your honesty. Do you still feel the same way about me?" Sandra looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of arrogance or manipulation, but all she saw was a man who truly wanted love beyond material things. She took a deep breath. "I do, but I need time to process this." Austin nodded understandingly. "Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." For the next few weeks, Sandra adjusted to her new role as Austin's personal assistant. It was strange at first working for the man she had begun to see as a potential life partner, but she remained professional. Austin, on the other hand, treated her with the same warmth and respect as he always had, but never pressured her about their relationship. One afternoon, as they sat in a meeting, Emily suddenly stormed into the office, her eyes blazing with fury. "You lied to me, Austin," she hissed, slamming her purse onto the desk. "You replaced me with this low-class girl." Sandra stiffened, but Austin remained calm. "Emily, I don't owe you anything. You showed me your true colors when you disrespected my mother." Emily scoffed, crossing her arms. "So what now? You think she is better than me, just because she acted all kind and humble?" Austin met her gaze unwavering. "No, Emily, it is because she has a heart, something you never had." Emily's face turned red with anger. "You will regret this, Austin. Mark my words." With that, she stormed out, leaving a tense silence behind. Sandra let out a small breath, not realizing she had been holding it. Austin turned to her with a reassuring smile. "Are you okay?" Sandra nodded. "I am fine." The days passed, and Sandra found herself growing more comfortable around Austin again. They spent more time together, not just at work, but outside as well. She saw the man behind the suit, the one she had liked from the start, and it only deepened her feelings. One evening, Austin invited Sandra to dinner at a quiet, elegant restaurant. As they ate, he suddenly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Sandra," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were different. You showed me kindness when you thought I had nothing. You defended my mother without expecting anything in return. You have proven that true love is not about money or status, but about the heart." He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "Sandra, will you marry me?" Sandra felt her heart swell with emotion. She looked at the man in front of her, the one who had tested her, but had also shown her that true love required trust, understanding, and patience. She knew her answer before she even spoke. "Yes, Austin, I will marry you." The restaurant erupted into applause as Austin slipped the ring onto her finger. He leaned forward and whispered, "You just made me the happiest man alive." Their wedding was a grand but intimate affair, attended by close friends and family. Sandra walked down the aisle with her head held high, knowing that she had found a man who valued her not for what she had, but for who she was. As they exchanged vows, Austin's mother watched with tears of joy in her eyes. She had found a daughter in Sandra, someone who had passed every test not with money, but with kindness and sincerity. As the ceremony ended and they walked hand in hand into their future, Sandra reflected on everything that had happened. Life had tested her in ways she never expected, but through it all, she had remained true to herself. Love, she realized, was not about grand gestures or riches. It was about finding someone who saw you for who you truly were and choosing them every single day. Dear viewers, what do you think about this story? Do you believe Austin was right to test Sandra, or do you think love should never be tested? Would you have reacted differently in Sandra's position? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Thank you for watching and stay blessed.